I'm gonna start with a take as hot as one of Luca's flamethrowers, so you should probably sit down if you aren't already. Chrono Trigger is an amazing game. I know, that's very brave of me to say, yet I'd even go so far as to call it one of the best ever made and easily the best JRPG ever made. So I replay Chrono Trigger once every 2 or 3 years, usually on my DS. As it's pretty hard to record footage on Nintendo's first dual-screen handheld, I'm running through the Steam version with the eventual goal of making a story critique in honor of Chrono Trigger's 30th anniversary. Anyway, for such a stellar game, you'd think there would have been a full-on remake or two during the remake-heavy 2010s. But 30 years later, we've only gotten a handful of ports from Square Enix, and most of them a little bit shoddy. As I've made my way through the Middle Ages with Chrono, Luca, and Frog in order to rescue Marl, I couldn't help but consider the fact that we don't really need a Chrono Trigger remake, and that's why we've only gotten ports. I do, however, wonder what an ideal remake would look like. So let's talk about it. But before that, I'd like to take just a second to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Lowell, a Canadian freelance game critic and guide writer based in Japan for like the last decade. You might have read my words on Nintendo Life, PC Games, and gamer guides and more. I'm turning some of my reviews and opinion pieces into videos here, as well as making videos about JRPGs and Metroidvania and other Nintendo titles when the Switch 2 comes out that my editors are far too smart to pay me to write. I'm close to being monetized on YouTube, and if I am, I'll be able to make videos more often, so consider shooting me a like or subscribe once you're done watching. If that doesn't convince you, I also have a cute Shiba Inu named Zelda. For every like this video gets, I'll give her 10 extra seconds of belly scratches. Don't let Zelda down. Now, you may think I'm going to suggest, as Chrono Trigger is such an amazing game, that it simply doesn't need a remake of any sort. It's too perfect already, so why bother? But there's a bit more to it than that. I do think we need a nuanced kind of remake for Chrono Trigger, as it was such a special game developed by a once-in-a-lifetime team of Japanese developers. And if that's not possible, it's best to leave Chrono Trigger alone. Consider, for example, how Chrono Trigger preludes the narrative-heavy shift JRPGs took when Final Fantasy VII released in 1997. As such, there's far less dialogue in this adventure through time than the JRPGs that came after. The recent full-on remakes of the 7th not-so-Final Fantasy easily built upon the original iterations of Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith because they had a ton more to work with in the first place. And even then, some fans disagree with the modern takes on these iconic characters. Chrono, Marl, and Luca, on the other hand, have much less of a foundation to build off of, and as a result, I don't trust Square Enix or whoever they might find to hand a remake off to not to fuck up these characters in an effort to draw in a wider audience. Compared to modern JRPGs, Chrono Trigger features way less dialogue, leaving room for the characters to come to life through the simple expressiveness of their little pixelated avatars and our imaginations, and I wouldn't want to lose that. I'm terrified that, in a potential Chrono Trigger remake, that the gaps left behind by the limitations of the original Super Nintendo hardware would be filled with endless party chatter as you waltz through Guardia Forest carving up Roundillo riders, thus changing or even ruining the image I've had of these characters for 30 years, especially if the original writers weren't involved. Like I just reviewed Atelier Yumiya, the Alchemist of Memories in the Envisioned Land, and having the cast of Chrono Trigger yammer on that much would definitely ruin the experience for me. I believe many modern JRPGs truly have gotten a bit too bloated in the story department, and I'd hate to see that happen to my favorite of all time. So I know that the DS version, which the Steam version is based on, added a new, more literal translation, which I do prefer, and an ending that links Chrono Trigger more concretely to Chrono Cross. These are great additions, and I wouldn't be opposed to more in the form of character interactions, such as maybe showing Frog and Marl discussing how she's a descendant of Lean, for instance, or some funny interactions given the massive technological differences between Isla and Robo, but not too many. So small curated additions like these would be the way to go, leaving the core narrative and characterization of its cast as intact as possible, rather than expanding outward the way Final Fantasy VII Remake did with Cloud & Co., or drowning us in dialogue and fan service like Atelier Yumiya. Visually, however, I do think Chrono Trigger could do with an upgrade. The high-resolution option on the Steam version is a joke, turning background environments into weird blocky textures. And while Chrono Trigger looks great on a Nintendo DS's small screen, not a lot of people have access to the 20-year-old handheld. It's clear we need a visual refresh at the very least. And no, I don't mean with fully rendered PC melting graphics. Such a big budget take would be a detriment to Chrono Trigger's charm. If we're going to get a remake at all, something akin to the HD 2D remakes we've seen in recent years that maintains the pixelated charm of the original is the way to go. Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake, which I also reviewed, is a great touchstone for what I'd personally enjoy most. There's perhaps a bit too much bloom and particle effects going on, but I would love to see environments like Truce Canyon given more depth and polish. And the same goes for giving both enemies and Chrono's party a little bit more detail to their sprites. I'd also want the anime-style cutscenes from the PS1 version to remain intact. Given the tragic passing of Akira Toriyama, I wouldn't want them to add new ones that kind of tarnish his legacy. Throw in an orchestrated score. I have a feeling Yasunori Mitsuda wouldn't say no to helping compose one, along with the option to switch to the original audio at any time, and I couldn't ask for much else, except for no voice acting. Please don't give a hypothetical Chrono Trigger remake voice acting, Square Enix. Please. I do have good reason for not having a lot of faith in Square Enix, despite the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters not being half bad. You see, they did disappoint Chrono series fans with Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers Edition, after all. I reviewed it for Nintendo Life and man, that shoddy port was in rough shape. I give it a 6 out of 10. It's better now after some patches, but Chrono Cross's remake, or remaster, serves only as a convenient way to play the iconic sequel. A definitive version by process of elimination. So let's recap. A remake of Chrono Trigger with reserved HD 2D style graphics, an orchestrated score, no voice acting, and maybe, if they bring back some of the original writers like Yuji Horii, insert a few more character moments in the narrative without altering the story otherwise. And you've got the perfect Chrono Trigger remake in my eyes, and the only way I see a remake being necessary. Except for one more thing. Added challenge for veteran players like myself. You see, I've played Chrono Trigger through like 17 times at this point. It's definitely not a difficult game in the latter 2/3. Rather than a simple hard mode, I'd love for a potential remake to take a page out of Dragon Quest book and add Draconian Quest-like settings. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, the superb Dragon Quest XI, Echoes of an Elusive Age, first introduced Draconian Quest. With it came several unconventional difficulty options like playing through the game without armor, being unable to run from fights, and severely reducing experience gained from monsters. I'd love to see something like this added to Chrono Trigger, and just about any JRPG really, along with an option to add more foes to go up against and maybe stricter rules without healing, for example. This would make Chrono's quest through time threatening, and provide an uphill battle for those of us that play it every few years to truly test our Chrono Triggering experience. But hey, that's just me writing a 1500-word script and spending 4 hours of editing on a hypothetical situation. While I'd be happy with another way to play one of my favorite games, I'd prefer one that upgraded it in meaningful but respectful ways. Otherwise, I truly do not think a Chrono Trigger remake is necessary. I can play my Nintendo DS copy until the end of time. But that's just me. What do you think? Do you think Chrono Trigger needs a remake? And if so, in your opinion, what would an ideal Chrono Trigger remake look like? Let me know in the comments below and I'll do my very best to respond. Anyway, thanks for making it this far. Here's a little video of Zelda running around. Thanks, bye.